Everyone who has read the book of Ruth knows what it is about. Loyalty. A young widow who refuses to leave her mother-in-law. A foreign woman who crosses a border and stays. The story is so clean, so complete, that most readers finish it feeling they have understood something rare, a small, quiet book about what it means to choose someone. And they are not wrong to feel that. But there is a detail in the very first chapter that does not fit the loyalty reading. Naomi, the woman Ruth refuses to leave, spends that entire chapter trying to send Ruth away. The 3 times in Ruth chapter 1, Ruth 1:8. Naomi tells her daughters-in-law to return home. Go back, she says, each of you to your mother's house. She releases them. She blesses them. She means it. Orpah kisses her and leaves, and the text does not judge her. Ruth stays, and Naomi does not celebrate. She keeps walking. She does not accept Ruth's famous vow as comfort. She does not say, "Then we go together." She goes silent. The loyalty story, the one you know, is already behaving strangely by verse 11. There is a word that runs through this book like a thread pulled tight beneath the surface. The Hebrew word is hesed. It appears 3 times in Ruth 1:8. Arling 3:1:0, and it is almost always translated as kindness or loyalty. But in the Hebrew tradition, hesed carries something larger than either word holds. It is the word used for God's covenant love, the obligation that does not expire. And the book never explains it. It plants the word and keeps moving. The question the book is actually asking from its opening verse to its last is not, will Ruth stay? It is who gets to decide who belongs. The book of Ruth begins with famine. A man named Elimelech takes his wife Naomi and their 2 sons out of Bethlehem, out of the house of bread, which is what the name means, and into Moab, a foreign land. Ruth 1:1-2. The sons marry Moabite women. Then Elimelech dies. Then both sons die. What is left is 3 widows in a country that has no legal framework for protecting any of them. And a rumor that the famine in Bethlehem has ended. Naomi decides to go home. She tells her daughters-in-law to go back to their own mothers. The story that follows begins, technically, as a story about who chooses to stay in a place where they have no standing. Ruth's vow in chapter 1 is among the most quoted passages in all of Scripture. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Ruth 1:6. Most readers stop here. The vow is the center, and everything that follows feels like its confirmation. But the vow is spoken into silence. Naomi does not respond to it with warmth. The text says simply, when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. Ruth 1:8. She stopped arguing. That is all. The loyalty has been declared and received with exhaustion, not gratitude. When they arrive in Bethlehem, the whole town stirs. The women ask, "Is this Naomi?" And Naomi answers with a renaming.com. Do not call me Naomi, which means pleasant. Call me Mara, which means bitter, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. Ruth 1:20. This is not a moment of faith restored. This is a woman publicly rewriting her own identity at the city gate. She does not say God has abandoned her. She says God has done this. The distinction matters. Naomi is not in despair about God's existence. She is in grief about God's actions, and she says so plainly. At the entrance to her hometown, Ruth stands beside her and is not mentioned again in the chapter. There is something the book has done quietly in this first chapter that is easy to miss because the emotions are so large. God has not spoken. Not once. Naomi prays that God will show hesed to her daughters-in-law, but that prayer goes unanswered in any direct sense. God is not heard, not seen, not confirmed. The famine ended, but the text does not say God ended it. Ruth stayed, but the text does not say God moved her. The book of Ruth is among the books in the Hebrew Bible most often cited as one where God does not speak directly. Scholars frequently pair it with Esther in this observation. What remains is a story that moves entirely through human decision, human refusal, and human silence, and asks whether hesed can live in that space. That question is not rhetorical. The book will spend 3 more chapters answering it. And the answer will come, not through a voice from heaven, but through a sandal placed on the ground, and a name spoken by women at a doorway. In chapter 2, Ruth goes to glean. This is the scene most readers experience as the beginning of the love story. A young woman in a field, a wealthy man who notices her. But before anything else happens, there is a legal architecture underneath this scene that changes everything you see in it. The Torah law of gleaning codified in Leviticus 1:9-10 and Deuteronomy 24:19-21 required landowners to leave the edges of their fields unharvested and to forbid their workers from collecting grain that fell. This was not charity. It was law. It was a structured system by which the landless poor could access food through their own labor, without begging. Ruth is not wandering into grace. She is entering a legal system and working it precisely when Boaz arrives at the field. The first thing he does is ask about Ruth. Whose young woman is this? His foreman answers with a description that is unusually detailed. She arrived this morning. She asked permission to glean. She has worked steadily with almost no rest. This report was not generated in the moment. Boaz has been told about Ruth before this scene. The text confirms it. Boaz says to her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me." He already knew. He came to the field knowing the meeting is not accidental. Something deliberate is already in motion, and Ruth is not the only one working the system. Boaz extends protection to Ruth, permission to stay in his field, access to water his workers draw, an instruction to his men not to touch her. When Ruth asks why he would show her hesed, she uses the word he answers, not with affection but with record. It has been fully told to me. Her labor, her loyalty to Naomi, her choice to cross the border. He is not falling in love with a stranger. He is honoring a woman whose actions have already been witnessed, reported. And while the romance reading places feeling at the center of this exchange, the text places testimony there. What Boaz responds to is not Ruth's presence. It is her documented history. Some scholars, including Traud Fisher in her reading of Ruth's legal agency, suggest that Ruth's navigation of the gleaning system as a Moabite woman represents a quietly subversive act. She is accessing Israelite covenant law as a foreigner, using its own provisions to insert herself into the community before she has any formal status. The text does not state this explicitly, but Ruth's question to Boaz, "Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner," is not false modesty. It is, the legal reading suggests, a precise question about standing. She knows her status. She is asking him to name the principle by which he is extending it. She is not passive in this field. She is building a case. When Ruth returns to Naomi that evening, she carries what the text describes as an ephah of grain. Scholars estimate approximately 22 liters, which would represent an extraordinary amount for a single day's gleaning. Naomi's response is immediate. "Where did you glean today? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." When Ruth names Boaz, Naomi shifts. The man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers. The word translated redeemer is goel, the kinsman redeemer, the one bound by law to restore what a family has lost. Naomi has known about this legal mechanism all along. She knows Boaz exists. She came back to Bethlehem knowing he was there, and she has said nothing, not to Ruth, not at the city gate, when she renamed herself Mara, not during the weeks Ruth was gleaning in a field she had not yet identified as Boaz's. Something shifts in Naomi's posture the moment that name is spoken. The woman who arrived calling herself bitter, who received Ruth's vow in exhausted silence, is suddenly alert. The question that should be sitting with you by the end of this chapter is not whether Boaz and Ruth will end up together. It is, what has Naomi been waiting for? And why did she wait until Ruth came home carrying evidence? Naomi sends Ruth to the threshing floor at night. The instruction is precise: wash, anoint yourself, put on your best clothes, go down to the floor. Do not make yourself known until the man has finished eating and drinking. Then observe where he lies. Uncover his feet and lie down. Most readers encounter this scene and feel the intimacy of it. A woman approaching a man in the dark, uncovering him, lying at his feet. The romantic reading is available. It has always been available. But there is another framework sitting directly underneath it. And once you see it, the scene never reads the same way again. The threshing floor in ancient Israel was not a private space. Scholars of Israelite legal practice note it was a commercial and legal ground where grain was weighed, transactions completed, agreements witnessed by those present. When Ruth approaches Boaz here, she is not choosing the most romantic location available. She is choosing the most legally legible one. And when Boaz wakes and she identifies herself, her words carry exact weight. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. Ruth 3:9. The word translated wings is kanaf. You have heard it before in this book. In chapter 2, when Boaz first speaks a blessing over Ruth, he says, "The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Ruth 2:1-2. The word is kanaf, wings, refuge. Now Ruth comes to the threshing floor and asks Boaz to spread his kanaf over her. The text invites the reading that she is not simply asking for marriage, she is asking Boaz to become the answer to his own prayer. What he asked God to be for her, she is now asking him to be. The petition is theological before it is personal. And the word that holds both moments together, the blessing in the field and the petition on the threshing floor, is the same word. Ruth has not only remembered what Boaz said, she has built her entire case around it. She is not appealing to his generosity, she is holding him to the logic of his own invocation. Boaz responds to her petition with immediate recognition. May you be blessed by the Lord. My daughter, you have made this last act of hesed greater than the first. He does not hesitate. He does not negotiate. But then he names the thing that stands between the petition and its resolution. There is a redeemer nearer than I, a closer goal, someone with the legal right and the legal obligation to act before Boaz can. Ruth has done everything correctly. The petition is valid. The witness is willing. And there is a man, unnamed so far, who holds the first claim. The sandal has not moved yet. Everything that will happen next depends on whether that man is willing to walk forward or step back. What happens next in the text is quiet and easy to read past. Boaz sends Ruth home before dawn, before anyone can be seen at the threshing floor, before a story can form around what was or was not decided. He gives her 6 measures of barley and says, "Do not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. The word he uses is the same one Naomi used when she returned to Bethlehem and said God had brought her back empty. Ruth carries grain again, but the closer Redeemer is still out there, unnamed, and no one has spoken to him yet. The legal machinery is wound tight. What holds the story in suspension for one more night is not uncertainty between Ruth and Boaz. It is the existence of a man who has not yet been asked, who does not yet know what the question will cost him. What the legal reading restores is Ruth's full agency. She is not a woman hoping to be chosen. She is a woman who has identified the applicable law, located the correct location, timed the approach, framed the petition in the exact language of covenant obligation, and named the precise legal role she is asking Boaz to fill. Every word she speaks on that threshing floor is chosen. The question she leaves Boaz with is not, "Will you love me?" It is, "Will you act on what the law and your own prayer have already said?" The next morning, Boaz goes to the city gate. This is where it happens, not in a field, not on a threshing floor, not in private. The gate of an ancient Israelite city was its legal center. Contracts were made there. Witnesses gathered there. Disputes were resolved there. Boaz sits down. He waits. And the closer Redeemer, the man with the first legal claim, passes by. Boaz calls to him and says, "Turn aside. My friend, sit down here." The word the text uses for this man is not his name. It is Ploni Almoni. In Hebrew, it means so-and-so, a certain someone, nobody in particular. The narrator of Ruth names every significant character in this book: Elimelech, Naomi, Mahlon, Shilion, Orpah, Ruth, Boaz, Obed. Even minor figures receive identifying details. This man, the one with the first legal claim, the one whose decision will determine everything, is called Ploni Almoni. In the Talmud, the rabbinical tradition read his namelessness as a form of judgment. A man who refused his covenant obligation forfeited his place in the story. He is not punished in the text. He is not shamed. He simply ceases to exist as a named person. The text does not editorialize. It simply does not name him. His erasure is quiet, and it is permanent. He will be remembered, if at all, only as the shape of an absence, the outline of the space through which everything that matters will pass. Boaz lays out the transaction carefully. There is land belonging to Elimelech available for redemption. Ploni Almoni has the first right. The man agrees immediately. "I will redeem it." Then Boaz adds the second clause: "On the day you redeem the field, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate his name in his inheritance." The man's answer changes: "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it." Something in the addition, the Moabite woman, the dead man's name. The cost is more than he is willing to carry. He declines. And then he does the only thing left to do. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it for yourself," he drew off his sandal. The narrator pauses here to explain the custom. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging to confirm a transaction. One drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. The sandal is transferred. The rite passes. Ploni Almoni is barefoot and legally finished. He will not appear again. The text moves on without looking back at him. There is no scene of him walking away. No final word spoken. No indication of what he felt. He removes a shoe, places it in another man's hand, and disappears from human history. The man who had every right, the standing, the legal claim, the first position in line, removed his sandal and walked out of the story without a name to leave behind. Boaz receives the sandal and speaks his declaration before the witnesses. You are witnesses today that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. The witnesses respond, we are witnesses. Ruth is not present in the text at this moment. The transaction that determines her belonging is completed at a gate she did not attend, by a man saying words she did not hear, ratified by the removal of a shoe belonging to a man who will have no name. This is the architecture of her belonging. Not romance, not heroism, negative space. Ruth conceives and bears a son. The text says it plainly. The Lord gave her conception. And she bore a son, Ruth. 4:1-3. This is the first time in the entire book that God is directly credited with an action, not the end of the famine, not Ruth's decision to stay, not the encounter at the threshing floor, not the sandal transfer. All of that moved through human hands, human refusals, human hesed. And then, at the moment of birth, the text attributes the conception directly to God. The book seems to be making an argument about how the divine moves, not through intervention, through consequence, not by overriding the human machinery, by working inside it, quietly, at the place where human willingness runs out of things it can do on its own. It is worth staying with this for a moment. The book of Ruth is 4 chapters long. In those 4 chapters, God is referenced by name many times, blessed, invoked, prayed to, appealed to. But God never answers directly, never speaks. The hesed Ruth performs. The hesed Boaz extends. The hesed that Naomi prays will be shown to her daughters-in-law. All of it moves through human beings who choose to act or choose to refuse. And then, when the legal architecture is complete, when the sandal has been transferred and the witnesses have spoken and the belonging has been formally conferred, only then does the text say the Lord gave her conception. The women of Bethlehem named the child, not Ruth, not Boaz, and the women of the neighborhood gave him a name saying, a son has been born to Naomi. Ruth 4:17. The community speaks his name into existence. They call him Obed, meaning servant, or worshipper, and the text records this as the naming. Ruth, who crossed a border for this quote, who gleaned in a foreign field, who made her petition on a threshing floor in the dark. Ruth is not the one who names her son. The community that once did not know her holds her child and speaks his future into being. Then the text does something unusual. Naomi takes the child and holds him to her breast. And the women say, a son has been born to Naomi. The book began with Naomi losing everything, her husband, her sons, her name. She renamed herself Mara, bitter. She said God had dealt bitterly with her and brought her back empty. Now she holds a child at her breast, and the community gives him to her as if the loss has been answered, as if the emptiness has been filled. The arc of the book, if you follow Naomi rather than Ruth, is almost unbearable in its completeness. Empty at the start of chapter 1, bitter at the city gate, silent through Ruth's labor and petition, present but unnamed through the gate scene, and now here, at the center of the frame, holding what she thought God had taken permanently. But look at who is standing at the edge of this scene. Ruth, who made all of it possible, who gave everything she is present. But the child is described as Naomi's. This is not an oversight. The book is doing something with this. The book closes with a genealogy. These are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered David. Ruth 4:1-8-22. 10 generations. The line runs from Perez, a name that carries its own story of an irregular birth. Another woman standing outside the expected social category, straight to David. Ruth's name does not appear in the genealogy. The woman who crossed the border, made the petition, bore the child. Her name is not in the line of descent. The line belongs to the men, and yet the line would not exist without the woman whose name the genealogy does not carry. The book of Ruth opens with a woman arriving in a foreign land with nothing, no land, no family name, no legal standing. A Moabite, an outsider by every framework available to the culture she is entering. And it ends with a genealogy that runs to David and does not contain her name. You could read that ending as erasure. Many have. But consider what the book has shown us, from beginning to end, about how belonging actually works. It is never self-declared. Ruth declared it at a crossroads in chapter 1. In the most beautiful words the book contains. And Naomi received those words in silence and kept walking. Belonging, in this book, is not something you claim. It is something that is conferred by a community through a system inside a legal architecture built from human choices and human refusals. One act of hesed laid on top of another until something solid forms beneath your feet. The question the book was asking from its opening verse is not answered so much as it is demonstrated. Who gets to decide who belongs? Not the one who crosses the border, not the one who makes the vow. The community holds that power, and in this book quietly, without ceremony, it uses it. Ruth arrived empty. Naomi arrived empty and said so. And what fills the emptiness by the book's last verse is not a feeling, not a declaration, not even a relationship. It is a name, Obed, spoken by a community, held by a grandmother, written into a genealogy, carried forward to David. The belonging Ruth came to find was built, piece by piece, through a legal system, through a man's documented testimony, through a prayer turned into a petition, through a sandal removed by a man who chose not to carry what the law asked him to carry. Every link in that chain was human, and at the end of it a child, and after the child a king. Somewhere in the space between Ruth's arrival and Obed's naming, a man removed his sandal and walked away barefoot. His name was not recorded. His reasons were not judged. He simply declined, and in declining, he left the space through which everything else entered. None of it required his heroism. All of it required his absence. The space he left is exactly the size of everything that followed.